Welcome to Sense of Self, a conversation series about reclaiming our narratives, where we dive deep into the journeys that shape who we are. I'm your host, Dr. Gauri Aragon.
Some of my colleagues were like, you should be the next mayor, here's why. And I was like, I don't want to do it. It was complete imposter syndrome. I said, let me think about it. And then I talked to a bunch of prior mayors and they were like, what are you doing? You know how hard it is to become mayor because your colleagues all have to agree. And it's really hard to do that.
In today's episode, I speak with Sumbul Siddiqui, the first female Muslim mayor of Cambridge, Massachusetts. In my conversation with Sumbul, we talk about what it was like to grow up in a working-class family, facing bullying from those closest to her. Rather than letting those voices define her, she set out to find her own community, a circle of love and support she built from the ground up. Fueled by a deep passion for people and justice, Sumbul was elected to city council, and just a few years later, was unanimously voted in as mayor, right as the world was grappling with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. In this conversation, we explore what it means to lead with heart during times of crisis, and how, when a harsh article threatened to derail her next election, it was the very community she had poured herself into that helped her stay grounded and true to her values. Together, we reflect on resilience, the power of chosen family, and how Sumbul emerged from adversity stronger, wiser, and more committed than ever to serving others. It is important to note these discussions do not constitute mental health care. Each guest has given their consent to participate, has had full control over what aspects of their journey were shared, and either currently engages in therapy or has done so in the past. So get comfortable, take a breath, and join us for another conversation about breaking cycles, finding hope, and reclaiming what it means to be yourself. This is Sense of Self. Let's get started. If you could just tell us your name and where you're from, that would be great.
My name is Sumbul Siddiqui, and I am originally from Karachi, Pakistan. We came here to the United States when I was 2, and I grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Do you have a sense of why your parents picked your name, Sumbul?
I think it was my grandfather who actually chose my name. He loved flowers. The last name Siddiqui signifies friendship.
Does Sumbul just mean flower, or is it a particular type of flower?
I think it's a type of musk root. Nothing cute.
So you moved from Pakistan when you were 2. What sort of prompted the move?
I think my parents wanted a better life. And my dad's actually from India, Lucknow, and my mom is from Karachi, and they met in Pakistan. They wanted a fresh start. I have a twin brother. And so it was the 4 of us I think it was just, let's take this journey and see how it goes.
How young were you when you have your first memory of having a twin?
I've always just had someone else there. And I just have that distinct memory of, okay, it's Sumbul and Rahan. My mom dressed my brother and I alike in the same clothes. We had the same haircut. I think she wanted twin boys. We slept in the same bed, same room for years and years. It's like he's my left hand in a way. Like he's just always been there.
Was that like a comforting feeling?
I think it's mostly a comforting feeling. I have early memories where we were in the same class, someone would pick on me and my brother would bite them, which he'd get in trouble for. We, I think, were a unit for those early years, and there's always someone to play with, someone to be with, and we really just had each other. There is a huge comfort in that, especially in those early years when you're in a new place and you're growing up and your parents actually don't know what's really going on. And so you have each other.
It can be a big blessing, or else you're stumbling through these early years in Cambridge, Massachusetts by yourself with no one else who can really understand your particular experience. When do you remember being your own person, like that you were distinct from him?
Probably as we got older, and I think while we were still sharing our bunk bed, when we'd get into fights, I think I realized, okay, I don't have to do exactly what he's doing. I can have other people I talk to and interact with. Those early years, especially in the middle schools, as I made more friends, I think we just splintered off and really didn't spend that much time as we did growing up together.
You joked about it, but you said that you think your mom wanted twin boys. What made you say that, apart from the haircut?
She knew what to do with boys. And I think she was like, okay, the clothes are easy. It's really simple. And I think they're maybe easier to deal with girls. I think that's the kind of the sense I had. Growing up, there was a huge closeness that they both had together that I realized early on when I said, oh, I don't want this short haircut because everyone's calling me a boy. Or the kids are saying I should use the boys' bathroom because of my haircut. I was like, I want to grow my hair long. I did things that were different. I think it was hard for her to come along with that. And I think she grew more attached to my brother in that respect. It just felt she thought that boys were easier than girls.
How do you remember making sense of that? Like finding an explanation as to why your mom and Rehan were closer or why you had to have his haircut and he couldn't have your haircut?
I was very confused about their bond. And I instead found support in books and imaginary things. And I have this quilt that I still have had since I was born. My grandma actually made me that quilt. My grandma passed away before I was born. She had made this quilt for me. And so I found solace in my quilt. And quilt became my friend and kind of my sibling in some ways, while my mom and my brother bonded so much. It was confusing.
Yeah, confusing because you were like, why don't we have that bond? Like you or your mom or you or your brother?
Yeah, I think I've always wanted to be closer to him and her, especially growing up. And I think that was hard as a kid growing up.
I'm familiar with this idea of immigrant parents dressing their daughters as boys. Do you remember wanting to feel like a girl or wanting to be a girl?
I think I remember wanting to be a girl mostly because other kids were so mean. And I actually enjoyed wearing the clothes, and I actually really did feel like I liked that haircut. It was just not something that was that accepted, that you can wear blue colors, you can wear like boy shirts and other things. And I remember I wanted to grow my hair out and maybe start wearing pink because it was what other girls were doing. I was so impacted by others when someone is trying to bully you or say something and you want to then change your behavior. I think this sense of, do I belong? This imposter syndrome, all of this, it doesn't go away necessarily. I think it starts early and then you're constantly questioning, oh, do I fit in? I remember early on always feeling, because of how I had been dressed by my mom, am I fitting in? And wait, I don't think I am, so let me adapt.
And what was your relationship like with your mom?
I would describe it as distant because I felt that my mom and my brother were so close that there was no room for me. And I think ultimately, as I got older, my mom and my brother teamed up against me and made fun of me. And generally, it wasn't a great environment. I think I had this feeling that I want them to love me, but they clearly don't know how to express it. So I'm just going to find other ways to make myself feel better. And at that time, my dad was really never home because he worked 2 jobs. So he'd go from one job to the next, and then he'd come home around 10 p.m. And sometimes I would have probably written him a letter saying, Mom and Rahan were really mean to me today, and I want you to talk to them because they're so mean to me. But by the time he, I think, read them, I was asleep. So it was just like this circle. It was a distant relationship for sure.
When you say they were mean to you, what were they saying?
They would make fun of me often about my weight, or they'd comment around my acne and just say, oh, you have a lot of acne, you're Miss Pimple or you're Pimple. And I just remember it was really terrible to hear that from your mom and your
Yeah.
brother just making fun of you constantly. And I'm just there listening to it and feeling really alone, really alone. Yeah, it sucked.
You are somebody who I can, for the first time when I met you, could tell that you really prioritize your friendships and put a lot of love into them. Even the fact that your friends can reach out to you when they're having a bad day and like they know that you're going to be like a listening ear and it's not a burden to you, that is a type of love that you have to cultivate and develop somewhere. And some people get to develop that when they're younger because they have it modeled to them by their family. Others have to develop it for themselves. It sounds like that's something that you found a way to develop for yourself.
I've always felt, especially because of those dynamics growing up, that I was on my own and that I had to find an outlet. And I knew at that time, and I especially know now, that like those interactions with my brother and my mom were not healthy. And I get that in immigrant cultures, especially South Asian, there's a lot of tough love and there's a lot of mean kind of comments. And I think at the end of the day, it's not okay. And I think that behavior is not healthy for young people. And I think at that time, I just said, okay, this is how they're going to be. I'm going to find my own way and find people who can be nice to me. And I think that's why I really loved my teachers growing up. And I loved, I think, friends. And I had to really work on being okay with being alone in some respects.
It usually takes some sense of knowing that somewhere inside of you, you are worthy of, deserving of that kind of kind treatment, which can at times get stomped on. Like you can really lose the understanding that you're allowed to be treated well. What allowed you to continue believing in the fact that you were even deserving of that or could find it elsewhere?
I think while I really searched for finding it elsewhere, I think actually thinking, oh, am I worthy of love? Do I deserve love from them? I think I treated those two things separately. I think it did make me feel like they don't appreciate me, they don't really love me, and I don't know if they'll ever love me. I think I remember saying, like, will anyone ever love me?
Yeah, because that loneliness when you are a kid surrounded by people who are supposed to care for you, but then don't, it's just very confusing. And there's so many different ways in which you can internalize that, and it sounds like for you, maybe initially you internalized it, but also put it over there a little bit so that you could be in the world and find other connections.
I have felt that I've always had pretty low self esteem, and
Mhm.
I've had this self deprecating humor. And I have often felt that maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not going to be liked by everyone. And I've had definitely imposter syndrome of, do I belong here? And I think I remember just when I got into college and I was at Brown, I remember thinking, how did I get into this place? And who are these people? I feel really stupid. And I
Mhm.
felt like I couldn't do it. And that was, I think, the first moment where I felt, oof. And then the second moment was in law school. Again, what am I doing here? Why am I here? And am I going to get through this? And then it's continued on. I think I've become more confident in some ways as I've been a politician, but I have a lot of anxiety around my confidence and thinking about, oh, am I doing the right thing? Am I okay? Am I okay? Do I belong here?
Can you remember an early friendship where you started to feel less alone and felt like this person cared about you?
Yeah, I think my friend who I met in second grade, Juliana, and I'm still good friends with her. She is one of the kindest people. And I remember the first thing I said to her was, "Oh, I know I have this haircut, but I'm not a boy." And she was like, just laughing. She's like, "I know, and that's okay," or something like that. And we just have been friends ever since. And she had just moved to Cambridge from Bahamas, and she's always been a great friend.
What did it feel like to be in a friendship, a relationship like that?
It was great to have just someone who was actually really nice, because I do have also memories of other girls who were very mean. They were mean girls. And I think some of that behavior, it's learned behavior. I think I remember being a mean girl at some points, but then I realized, why am I doing that? And then there's people like Juliana who I want to be more like, who are just really kind.
I'm really glad you framed it that way, because the idea of this learned behavior, because it's so true, because if you don't know any better, if that's what you're around, and it's really heartening that even at that young age of whatever, 7 or 8, you met someone and realized, like, oh, here's someone who's behaving differently. I guess that's an option. Having the flexibility almost to be like, oh, I guess I can choose that. And sounds like it's your superpower. It's like that ability to choose different and be intentional about these relationships and your own, what you bring to those relationships in spite of what you may have learned and been exposed to. You went to college, you went to law school, you didn't feel like you fit in. Did that imposter syndrome just stick with you that entire time? Or were there moments where you started to feel a bit more like, oh yeah, okay, I know why Sumbul Siddiqui is here?
I think definitely through college, through law school, those were shaky periods where I was just going through the motions, and that I knew I had to go to college because that's what my parents wanted. My parents wanted me to go to law school, so I did that. And it was a lot of kind of living up to their expectations of me and trying to figure out how to please them. It's always been, how do I make them happy versus me. In 2014, I moved back to Cambridge, and I had actually failed the bar. At that moment, it was more like, am I going to ever be successful? Am I going to ever find a job and prove to my parents that I can be something?
How did your friends respond to you when you would share that fear with them?
My parents knew I failed before I did, because they got the letter in the mail, and then I came home and my mom was like crying, like, "You failed." And I was like, "Great, okay." It's so dramatic. Generally, my friends, the ones who I told, because I did feel embarrassed, right? I couldn't tell everyone. I didn't tell all my law school friends. I didn't tell everyone. I told a few select group, and everyone was like, "It's okay. You'll take it again." And that's exactly what happened. And I passed. When I think about my parents and where they're coming from, they have worked super hard. They've had really menial jobs. And my mom's been a cashier at a local grocery store. My dad's had a lot of various jobs, a produce clerk and shipping clerk, and they've just wanted us to have better lives than them. And so as much as I was really worried about, oh, here we go, they're going to be so disappointed, I think there's also this guilt of they've done so much that you feel like you almost, I guess it's that trap of you feel guilty.
There's something owed in a very particular way.
It gets elevated when you grow up poor, and you feel like you need to just do more for them. Even though they are not asking you to give them money, they've never said, give us money ever. They actually give me money or my brother money randomly, but they just are like, we want you to not be in our situation.
And then you feel the pull to be able to provide that for them, even if they're not asking.
Exactly, in a form of a job or prestige, making them proud.
If you had to think back on like a younger version of yourself, how would you describe her?
I think she was always constantly looking for a way to be accepted and a way to be loved. And she was confused. And I think she always just wanted to fit in and be liked. And I think she probably didn't want to be as alone as she felt, having that distance from my mom and my brother and feeling like I didn't belong to my family and didn't really know what to do. I think she was a lonely person.
Yeah. How did she feel about herself?
I think she just felt not good enough. And
Yeah.
she felt like she didn't have too much like support.
How did you explain that to yourself? The fact that you didn't have that.
I have my quilt.
Yeah.
I have my quilt. And I love my
God
quilt.
bless the quilt.
God bless the quilt. And the Urdu word for quilt is razai. I was like, I have my razai. Razai loves me. I love razai. And it was that. It was this really, I feel like a lot in adulthood, I've told people about razai and everyone knows about razai, but it is really weird.
Yeah.
They're like, you love your quilt a lot. And I'm like, I do. Because it signified so much for me. It signified my family that I wanted. It signified like just a lot of love. I actually wrote my college essay on quilt.
See?
So
Yeah.
I'm like, I got in somewhere. People were like, what are you writing about? I'm like, I'm going to make it connected to everything. And I did connect it. I talked about like my childhood and it resonated with at least Brown.
But in all seriousness, you've been in politics in Cambridge. And I remember when you first ran for councillor in Cambridge, what led you to want to be a councillor?
There were a few things that inspired me. I had early experiences in civic engagement as a high school student. And as a high school student, I loved going to City Hall with my other friends and talking about different issues that were impacting us as high school students. And I remember thinking, wow, I'm in this grand City Hall with my friends and we're talking to city councilors and they seem to like listening to me. I would love to do that one day. And I think it was in the back of my mind and I just had it in the back of my mind. And I think years later, I think it became more clear that what I really loved was helping people. And it's weird, I'm connecting it with my upbringing and not having much. There were these moments where I felt really alone and I really wanted to make sure that other people didn't feel alone. Knowing I've been helped by various public policies, whether that's affordable housing, Head Start, all these different immigration, right? All these policies that have shaped my life. I put that all together and I knew that I really liked people and I really liked thinking about policy and I wanted a way to merge it. And I felt that running for office for a city councilor at the local level could do that.
It's cool also that you mentioned that like having the experience of being listened to and being taken seriously was something that was really powerful for you and that you wanted to be able to give back and pay forward, which, as you've mentioned before, also was not totally random. Yes, it's nice to be listened to. How would you sort of describe that personal motivation for being in politics?
I definitely was never looking for these public affirmations. Certainly, I know my colleagues, some of them, they love that, being in the newspaper, being in that. I really didn't ever want that. And what I wanted and craved was relationships. This is my 8th year, going into my 8th year. It's been a beautiful thing as much as it's been a hard thing. It's been amazing to be able to help people and be there for them.
You went from being a city councilor to then running for mayor. How did you have to see yourself in order to even go for that?
It's interesting because in Cambridge, you get chosen to be the mayor by your colleagues. And so there's this extra layer of you have to make sure people like you.
Yeah.
And I remember in 2019, I had just won my election. I had gotten the most votes. And some of my colleagues were like, you should be the next mayor. Here's why. And I was like, I don't want to do it. I said, I'm good. This is my 2nd term. And you want me to be the mayor? Like, it was complete imposter syndrome. I said, let me think about it. And then I talked to a bunch of prior mayors and they were like, what do you doing? You know how hard it is to become mayor because your colleagues all have to agree and you have to get like consensus. And it's really hard to do that. So you should do it. And I, again, was like, ooh, I don't want to chair the school committee. I'm scared. I'm this, I'm that. I think I quickly was like, you know what? It's a momentum. My colleagues are here saying they're going to vote for me, which is rare, and unanimously, which is also rare. And let me do it. And then that was 2020, and 3 months later it was COVID. So I was like, oh gosh, I wish I had waited. And then I ended up being mayor for 4 years, which is also something that doesn't happen. You don't get consecutive terms usually because of a rotating system.
You're describing being thrown into the deepest of ends when you were not even wearing a bathing suit initially. You're like, I'm good. I'm gonna stay over here. Pool looks good, but I'm fine being on this end. You know what I mean? And no, the water's fine. We all want you in here. And then you dive into the deep end and it's like frigid waters. But you're in there now and you're committed. There's no turning back. Here we are, that you are expected and end up growing the most. That's just nature. It just happens. So I want to hear more about what it was like for you to be Sumbul as mayor.
It was such a stressful environment. And especially as people were dying, and it was just, there's no how-to guide. And it was my first time in that situation. It was my first time being a manager of that many people, my first time trying to build a team out to help with doing the work. It was a very confusing time. And I think that first term particularly, I learned a lot. I made mistakes. At that time, I think I didn't give myself enough grace. I think I just was trying to do, and you're just constantly stressed. It was a very stressful 4 years, I'd say.
During that time, how did you lean on relationships to move through it?
Internally, I have surrounded myself with really great people and great friends who I can call and talk to. What I'm really good at is reaching out to people if I need them, because I think, again, that's something I learned very early on. That's not hard for me to say, something happened and I need your support.
As you move through these terms of being mayor, did that imposter syndrome start to quiet down a little bit?
I think it did that second election when I did so well. And I was like, oh, wow, people actually really liked me. And I did so well in the election compared to my other colleagues that I think I had to be mayor again. And they were like, clearly, you're the people's choice, so we're going to vote for you. I was like, okay, it comes here and there, but it never fully goes away.
And you mentioned that you felt like being in that position impacted your sense of self. What did you mean by that?
I think it made me feel that I am a resilient person, that I can do this job, that I could have an impact that was positive, that I shouldn't be so down on myself and have that inner critic be the loudest thing. So I think I was able to find that confidence and be able to be that leader that I think I needed to be, that the public needed me as well. And it wasn't easy, of course, but I think it made me feel like if I can do this challenge, I can get through anything and that I will be okay, because this is COVID. This is scary. This is getting through reopening schools. This is helping people who've lost their lives. There's jobs, there's family members. And I just had to believe in myself. And I think it did help. I think it impacted my sense of self in those ways.
It's like imposter syndrome really has no air to breathe, because it's like something is working that I'm doing. I guess I got to keep riding this wave. And you continue to be there. You're putting the work in. You have this motivation for why you're doing what you're doing. You're leaning on your friendships to keep you afloat, and not just afloat, but oriented to yourself and who you are. And I just imagine there's a ship in choppy waters, but you have enlisted your resources to keep you upright and moving forward in spite of, right? Or at least net forward. I'm setting the stage here because then something knocks you off your feet unexpectedly, which is, as we've talked about, this article that came out in the Boston Globe.
Yeah.
About you as Sumbul.
The article came out in the Boston Globe early October, about 3 weeks before the November 2023 election. The premise was that I had been a toxic boss to employees.
What was your reaction when that came out?
It was hard. I was defensive, right? I was like, this is ridiculous. And they've put two people on the record who have run against me, who had lost. Some of this is really orchestrated. I knew some of these anonymous voices, and actually I had apologized to some of these people because some of this behavior, an example was my reaction to someone telling me that they had found another job.
Mm-hmm.
I think looking back, that was my first term, and I did definitely not react well. I think it was definitely a mistake in how I reacted. And I had apologized to that person. And so it was really shocking to see some of that come up, and it didn't feel great. So it was a very kind of, I thought I'd made amends with some of these people, but clearly, like, it's politics. And then I just said, I have an election to win, and I'm going to just try to win that election, which I did.
For someone like you who was not wanting to be in the paper, you're doing this job for different reasons. You had a particular focus, you had a particular kind of inspiration and motivation for why you're doing what you were doing. There's a lot of very rapid expansion and growth internally that has to happen to be able to take on this kind of position, whether or not you knew COVID was happening or not. And then when you found that out, it's just a whole nother rapid expansion of your capacity and your ability to tolerate and just be in that kind of uncertainty and stress, which majority of people in the world will never, ever have a chance to experience. And so you're already in kind of like a unique strata of people. For some people, it could be like, oh, that's just BS, moving on, moving forward. How did you see yourself after that article came out?
It made me question a lot of things at first. But at the same time, the Globe's concentrated on one person who was my campaign manager 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I've really grown since my first election. Since 2017, I was able to quickly, with leaning on my friendships and my relationships, realize, sure, there were such situations. I made mistakes, not great, but I'm a growing manager. It happens. So many people have done similar things, and you learn from it. You apologize, you move on, which is what I had always done. It made me really sad, I'd say.
Was there any part of your reaction that left you questioning yourself as Sumbul?
I think it definitely made me question everything. I think it made me question, why am I in this role? I care so much about people. There's some people in that article who I had really poured into and tried to really help. And it made me feel like, do I build these relationships with people? It's something that I'm still trying to figure out. Just how close to be with the employees I do manage. I was like questioning myself of like, how did I end up here? How did this happen? How did this happen to me? Person who loves relationship and is a great friend.
When something is externally turbulent, it can start to feel internally turbulent as well. And I'm just curious how you worked your way through that turbulence, because you came out the other side and you kind of kept moving forward and studied yourself. But in the midst of that turbulence, like, how did you hold on to yourself?
I think I actually reached out to so many friends being like, this is happening. And they were like, what? And I was like, I just wanted to tell anyone who I was close to. And so I think it was helpful in that respect, because I think once it came out, people are like, you should react in the way you are reacting, and that's okay. And I think so I gave myself some grace on that. And I think then I said, things happen for a reason in some odd way. And this is awful.
After an experience like this, it can derail you, or it can have you take a step back and think about what could be changed. And I think it's a testament to the fact that you had built so many relationships that you're able to turn to them so quickly and parse through that. Most people do not have that type of community to lean on to bolster them and reorient them, because most people have not put in the effort and the energy over the course of years to have that. If you look back on it now, is that something that you were keenly aware of at the moment, or did it just feel kind of like the natural thing to do to you?
Yeah, I felt like I could go to them pretty quickly, and a lot of other people too, who were just maybe mentors of mine. And I did want to say my partner was also very important, so I don't want to discount them. So it was a group of people to help me get through that rough patch and remind me, like, this is who you are. It was really painful, and I think it's one of those things where it's always going to be a painful memory for me. It's always going to be out there, right? So that's something I have to figure out how to deal with and combat, because people definitely, you can Google me and it's there, and that's the pain of it. And I get through it because I have to treat it as part of this experience of politics. It's easy to doubt yourself, and I think it's just recognizing that you're going to always constantly be learning and trying and sometimes making mistakes, and you have to figure out how you react and move on from those mistakes.
And if you had to describe yourself now, Sumbul?
I am definitely like a less lonely person, I'd say. I have been able to find a lot of love in my life, and I feel like people love me back as much as I love them. And my relationship with my family has improved in some respects. I think I'm a stronger person, I'd say, as much as sometimes this job can be stressful. I love what I do, and I love the people. I love the people.
Thank you all for listening to Sumbul's episode. We hope you enjoyed it and that you'll tune in for episode 4 of Sense of Self next week. I'll be speaking with Fran Alegria, an award-winning filmmaker and director, about how she made sense of herself following a childhood sexual abuse. Please follow us on Instagram and TikTok at senseofself.podcast and subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the episodes from Season 2 and to catch up on Season 1 and its companion expert series. You can also learn more and join our email list at our website, www.senseofselfpod.com. This episode was produced by Dr. Gauri Aragam, Lizzie Rose, and Janice Vogel. It was mixed by Bree Matan with music from Blue Dot Sessions.